another watercolor tutorial with Andrew Broussard watercolors. Today I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I'm just letting it soak with water at the moment. Then we'll kind of talk a little bit about the plans for today's painting. Okay, so this lets the paper stretch, and as it stretches, I lift these up and I just push it underneath, and it just helps with buckling. 100% cotton paper works really well with this, and that's what this is. So, previously today, I did a watercolor painting experiment with more of a dramatic sky. And I kind of want to build off of that. And the experiment is going to be this. We're going to utilize earth tones within the sky, like the previous painting. We're going to lift out, we're going to try to get that drama, probably put some cerulean blue in those spots. There's a lot of interesting, beautiful things that came through in the last one. But the difference now is going to be, I'm going to paint wet and wet like usual. I'll dry off, and then I'm going to do a second dry brush, glazing. I'm not quite sure what the term would be. I guess wet on dry in the sky, which is something I never do. So that's the goal today, is just to see how it'll compare to the one previously today. Also, compositionally, I think I'm going to go with it's going to be kind of a boring composition. We're going to do a low horizon line, I think, just a basic horizon straight across, maybe some trees. We're not going to really do much in that regard. I really want to focus this tutorial experiment on the sky. So, like the previous one, we're going to start off with raw sienna. And I feel like raw sienna is just a perfect go-to for skies. This is common for a lot of other fast and loose YouTube artists. I think Stephen Cronin is a great example of that. And a lot of this comes from Ron Ranson, who was a big proponent of fast and loose hake brush watercolor paintings. And they would use the term like lubricating the paper with raw sienna. So we're going to put that in. Then I'm going to grab some Venetian red. Venetian red is an earth tone, a rust. I think it's PR 101 is the pigment number. It's the same as light red oxide. It's so you can use that instead if you're following along and you don't have Venetian red. The introductory level watercolors, I would say Cotman and the what's the other one that's good? Cotman and Van Gogh brands. I don't think they have a Venetian red, but this is Da Vinci brand that'll have that. But like I said, you could use light red oxide instead. And I also kind of really want to build up the opacity of this. With the previous, and I guess this is an issue with painting skies in general, is that you'll be able to start seeing things in it that aren't meant to be there. For example, for the previous one, there was a cat face, a cat that kind of took place. Two separate people had said that. And once somebody tells you that, it's very difficult to unsee. I'm going to grab alizarin crimson. This is the Cotman brand that I have. Alizarin crimson, I find a little bit, like a tube goes a long way. So I have not really upgraded that, but there's nothing wrong with this guy. I'm just going to build up shapes and the structures and kind of essentially just push paint around, just tickle around. We could grab ultramarine. I believe that's what we had done last time. since I have some of that alizarin on the brush still, I get a purple mix. So that'll help us start building up darks for clouds. Trying to just go for a very dramatic sky. I am trying to do the whatever colors are appearing up in the sky down below, just in case we decide to make it water down here. But I'm less focused on that. This is just more sky exploration. And those of you that follow along, that you guys like and comment and all that, I really appreciate that. Hearing back from you guys really helps me out and encourages me to continue doing this. So I really thank you. So if you're watching, I would appreciate it if you liked, subscribed. If you do have questions, feel free to comment. If I see the notification, I read it and I try to answer it. If I don't answer, or if I don't heart react or anything like that, it means I just didn't get the notification. I think sometimes YouTube censors some stuff as spam. I'm not sure how their algorithm works. This is the far distant clouds, thinner along the horizon. Now, one thing I want to be wary of is pushing too much to a muted brown. This is a Venetian red Payne's gray mix right here. Earlier today was the first time I ever used that mixture. Try out a light red oxide and a Payne's gray mix. That would probably be a fun mix. You can also do the very traditional one within the Ron Ranson and the Hake brush is Payne's gray and what's that called? The alizarin. One of the issues that I discovered from earlier today, and it's something that has popped up in the past, is if I use a mixture, and let's say it has the Payne's gray in it. Payne's gray, for the most part, and I've talked about this in the past, has black in it. It's black and a blue. Different brands have a different combination. Traditionally, it was 3 different colors mixed, but nowadays it's just mainly black and blue in the tube. But if I use something like this, or in here, when it photographs, it really picks up that black pigment that was used. So if you look at the photo at the beginning of the last painting, where there's the selection screen and you can pick the previous one, 150, you'll see those dots from the Hake brush of that black pigment, which is it's very weird that it acts in that fashion. I may have to start mixing my own Payne's gray if that's going to be a reoccurring issue. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the original formula for Payne's gray was. If you look it up online, you'll be able to see it. Maybe one day we can do a video about that. But it's weird having an issue like that to get to the point of painting, and I'm not claiming to be a great painter or anything like that, but to get up to a point in painting where now I'm starting to see those little subtle differences. And I've been watercolor painting, we'll say, for about 2 years now, maybe a little bit more. Prior to that was the Chinese flower painting, which was about a year. And then prior to that was a long hiatus where way back when in college I had done oils and charcoal and all that other stuff. So I'm just creating a little bit of structure down below. I could say that this is a little bit of reflecting pool right here. One thing that I'd like to hear from you all on is if you have Venetian red and you have light red oxide, can you tell the difference? On my palette, I can see the difference between them. I'm curious if you all see a difference and if you all have a preference between the two. I'm not sure if Indian red also falls into that very close category. This is more ultramarine in the mix, stronger concentration. You can put more ultramarine in the sky in our mixes, but one thing you have to be prepared for with ultramarine is that it's very granulating, which is a desired effect by many, but it adds a textured effect in the painting. So explore that. Somebody I know personally that I had worked with, I think she was saying she liked the Daniel Smith and how the Daniel Smith granulates. And I think some tubes of paint will say if it's granulating color or not. You could also get a medium to mix into the watercolor, and here it is right here. I just never used it yet. This is a granulating medium that you can mix and get that effect that ultramarine gets. That's another painting video in and of itself right there, isn't it? It's crazy with watercolor. We can probably continue every day with a new experiment, and not run out of ideas. See, this is where the brush texture gives me trouble in the final product. I didn't dry anything off yet. I didn't do any lifting. I could start using the edge of a paper towel to lift, but I want to save that for later on if we decide to use that technique. I try not to use the paper towel lifting technique too much, mainly because I have a hard time varying the texture. It's very easy for the texture to get repetitive. So it's a pretty dramatic sky. It's very, it's made up. I don't think my phone camera is good enough for taking photos of sunsets. I can try. Just pushing pigment around at that point right there. So very simple. Just ground and foreground. Painting the edge of the paper. I'll tell you that every time. That's one of my number one, I think that's a good personal rule, is that it just gives me the idea of everything, and that when it's framed, you can kind of select a little bit. It also just helps create a more panoramic, bigger view. Okay, so I would think at this point, I could probably keep playing around and trying to add pigment in, etc. But I don't think it'll be too beneficial. So what I want to do now is see if there's anything that I want to lift, if there's any whites, any lights that I want to pull up before I do the dry off. This is where photo references would really help to see where the highlighted edges of clouds would be. I'm just trying to let a little curvature sit and lift up some spots. So it's just very gingerly, very gently putting it in place. I am definitely not a master of this. You see how that pattern was repeated right there? So I don't want that to happen. Somebody did suggest using the natural sponge, which I do have. So that might be something we can explore. I have a few different sponges that I had purchased. I just have never used them yet. I'm not sure how you go about cleaning the sponge. I guess you just clean it and I guess wring it out. Pull out some white wisps. And you could probably get really loose with it and just do a push or a pull or something like that. Start getting movements, potentially. But paper towel, definitely a fun element. If you do a moon or something like that, you can definitely pull that moon out. If you did a moon, we could definitely add a glow all around. See right there, another experiment, moonlit, just doing this technique. So it's just endless what we can do. Now, before I do any dry off, let me see. I mean, we've just done all this with just the hake at this point. Add a little bit more darkness in here, just kind of just a very basic tonalist ground. In the previous painting, I had put a branch. I did the foreground on an angle and did a branch and scraped back in here, which added an interesting effect to that branch, but I think we'll leave that be. Okay, so now here's the thing. We're going to dry off and you're going to see a tonal shift take place. So everything's going to soften up. So let's see what happens. And also make sure if you dry at this stage, and we're going for a complete dry, we're not going to do any scraping or anything like that. Make sure you get the corners because it could potentially pull up right there and then you start getting that back run, that cauliflower effect in those areas. If it's super saturated still, hold your blow dryer up higher and that'll disperse and push the it'll push it around less. Okay? we are dry. Now, this is going to be a new thing for me, new experiment. In a painting or two in the past, I'm pretty sure that I've maybe wet it completely and then fed some color in over it. But I don't want to chalk that up and say that that's any experience with having done this. I think with this one, we're going to get a wet mix and we're going to paint on top of this, trying to accentuate the darks. I'm not sure how the edges are going to wind up on this. If we have to go in with a rigger that's wet and kind of soften things up. If a paper towel on top to soften things would help as well. This is just new territory right here. In fact, why don't we put it in these two spots? Like that. The two darkest parts. Let's give it a moment. We'll put a little bit down here, darken things up. Get a little bit of texture. Let's exploit the paper towel for a little bit of texture here. Lift some stuff up. Okay, so I added that dark mix. This is just, I think, Payne's Gray, Venetian Red, Ultramarine, just whatever was on there. As you can tell right now, it's definitely darker sitting on top. So we can lift a little bit to soften it. Get a little bit of texture right there. Let's take a wet rigger as an experiment. This is clean wet rigger. Where do we want to do this so we can see it? We'll do it in this area right here. So we can see how that winds up. So we're going to look for the edge that takes place when we dry, and we're going to see if this softens. Okay, I'm going to do the dry, and we'll see. So, edgewise, we went in here. I saw it as it was drying, but it doesn't really seem to take place. I think we still have a wet spot right there, but it wasn't really too much of an issue. The paper towel lifting before I started drying this new dark mass, I think that was definitely beneficial. It definitely darkened and sat on top. And I think the reason being that why that happens is we didn't go wet and wet, so we didn't have a dispersion. And I'm not too keen on the chemistry, the physics of the paper, but I think when it's wet and wet, the fibers are opened up and more pigment particles fall down within, and that might cause that diffused look as well. And we are layering on top of another bit of paint right there. So all in all, I think that building up would work. We could probably even do a more darker mass here and a more darker mass in that region. You see where I'm circling. You can kind of see that mark there. This cloud line is giving an issue. I I think it's fighting against the horizon line. Maybe this line should have been a little bit lower and tighter together. So there's a lot of interesting things we could have here. We could also experiment with this. Let me grab a wet paper towel, just dab a little bit of wet. We could probably also find regions to wet and lift if we wanted a little bit more texture in some spots. But that would be very nuanced, and we would have to do it, I think, all throughout. Let's see if there's anything else we can explore with this one. Let's do a little bit more dark right here and there to kind of see how that builds up. Okay. So this is a third coat right in that spot. Okay, so right there. All right, now it's darker because it's wet. A little bit of texture. Okay. And then let's do a dry off. Okay, I don't think there was really any added benefit to that one. With that, what I would say would be the two coats, so one wet and wet, one dry in certain areas to accentuate, will bring some out with the clouds if you're doing a fast and loose technique. A third probably isn't necessary unless you need to tweak some stuff around. It is helpful where we could do that and lift if we didn't get a good pattern previously. So I think what we should maybe do is just take a gray wash out of this. Let's just do a little cloud like that. Storm, rain. Kind of change things up a little bit. Yeah, a little texture down here. That's just experimental as well, just a quick little tack on to the end. Not really liking how it's stopping kind of midway in the painting. I can grab a little bit more dark right there. Okay, so there we go. Let's just dry it off. We could do a little storm cloud if we had, not storm cloud, birds or something like that. I'll just take a quick pen just to mark this. This is should be Noodler's Heart of Darkness, so that's a light fast fountain pen ink, just for a little bird or two. It's very Stephen Cronin-esque. Well, that's that. I hope you enjoyed. I don't know if I mentioned, of course, I have a Patreon account, which I would love for you to consider checking out. That helps with art supplies and whatnot. And for the higher tier, I do have some exclusive content for patrons. So I would love for you to consider. If not, it's okay. I understand. And I hope you all have a great day. I'll be back soon with more videos.